This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com. But before we get going on all things Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, and we're going to be talking about that next week, I want to put a bow on what you called the best year and a half of your life. Southeastern Championship Wrestling, or Continental, whatever you want to call it. It was very much the Fuller territory, and I wanted to do it justice. And we've had such a great time talking about your times there. I mean, my goodness gracious, the famous stories about the pot roast and now the repossessed car, and who could forget Boris and the 21 pieces of chicken, meeting the future Mrs. Lundy, and so much more. What better way to put a bow on your journey through Southeastern Championship Wrestling than to have a very special guest on? That's right. We're making an exception. We're changing the format. We're throwing out the rule book for a very special guest. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program. Our first guest ever in the history of Arn. It's the Tennessee stud, Mr. Ron Fuller. Mr. Fuller, how are you, sir?
Oh, I'm great, Conrad. So glad to be on, man, with you guys.
We are excited to talk to you. We've had a lot of fun talking about the good old days, the territory days, if you will, of professional wrestling. And we just wrapped up Arn's run in Southeastern Championship Wrestling, but a lot of great stuff happened to him. He got to brush up against the Armstrongs. He got to spend some time with Mr. Olympia and all about Mr. Stubbs. But maybe more importantly, Arn met the love of his life working in your old territory, and we wanted to just celebrate the good old days with you today.
Oh, I appreciate it, guys, man. Arn is just a tremendous guy. One of the best, if not the best worker we ever had, that came through and became a star. And I know he got married in Pensacola, and I couldn't be happier for him. It's a pleasure anytime I have an opportunity to talk to Arn.
Well, and he feels the same way about you. He talks about you and your entire family in such loving terms. And we've got a lot of younger listeners who really only knew Arn's work in WCW. And of course they're catching him these days on AEW as the Anderson legacy continues through his son, Brock. But you know all about growing up in a wrestling family. So to set the stage for some of our younger listeners who may not know about the Fullers and the Welches.
Well, we go back further than just about anybody. I come from the oldest and the largest wrestling family on the planet. My grandfather, Roy Welch, started in 1924. I've got more than 20 members of my family that either wrestled, or refereed, or promoted. We come from a family of wrestlers, not just wrestlers, but promoters as well. My grandfather started the first Tennessee territory, which at one time was having matches in 12 states across the South. Then my father started wrestling, and he became a wrestling promoter, drew some phenomenal crowds in some very odd places, almost 40,000 people in Mobile, Alabama, maybe Atlanta's largest crowd, or certainly one of their largest in 1965. And Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, one of its largest crowds ever. So my father was in it. I have a generation of wrestlers. There was 4 people in my family's original group: Roy Welch, Herb Welch, Jack Welch, and Lester Welch, and they all had sons, a lot of boys in the family. All of them turned into wrestlers, and we had another offshoot of them. Make a long story short, we are the biggest and the oldest in all the sport, and some of us were wrestlers, some of us were wrestlers and promoters, some referees. We've done just about all of it, and it's quite a legacy I come from, and I'm really pleased to be able to say I'm a part of the Welch family, the Fields family, the Fuller family. I mean, it's pretty much been a dynasty.
You gotta get excited about saving people all those dollars. They can limousine ride and jet fly now with that extra cash.
And they can style and profile with a quick 10-minute phone call right now to 425-0105.
That's 425-0105.
Woo!
SaveWithConrad.com.
Ron, I have a question, and it's just, I'm such a fan of the history of the business, and it's like you don't get to hear the guys that came before me. Scott Almighty, I'm a million, but I wanted to be a wrestler about 8 years old, and from the point I was hooked, that's all I ever wanted to do. But it was something, it was like a pipe dream to me. You growing up in the business and your father and grandfather being in, was it a foregone conclusion that you were going to be a wrestler? It was just a question of when you were old enough to start wrestling? Was that kind of a family deal that, hey, Ron and Robert are going to be wrestlers and that's it, period? Or was it a choice? Or
my dad, he pushed us a little bit to wrestle, but let's go back to my grandfather. And when my dad was born and started wanting to be a wrestler and started training to be a wrestler, my granddad didn't want him to be a wrestler. He kind of pushed him away from it, so much so that my dad quit before he actually got really started as a wrestler and learned how to weld and went to Chicago and started as a welder in Chicago. Basically gave up on wrestling early on and then came back to it. For me, I grew up always wanting to be a wrestler. And I was a pretty decent basketball player. I ended up playing ball in college at Clemson and University of Miami. And, and I could have maybe gone and become a pro. I was pretty decent at it. But I never had any thoughts about doing anything else other than being a wrestler. And part of that, Arn, is and it's a great story. When you were on with me, I really loved your 8-year-old story when you called your buddy up, you'd watch the TV, and you said, "Come down, man. Come on down here. I want to see you. You got to see what's going on." And you went and put a mask on, and you got your rope out, and you hid up on the couch, and when he came in the door, you jumped off on his back and choked him out with you. I mean, I was like that as a heel. I mean, as a young guy, from 5 years, I went to my first wrestling match at 9 days old. I don't remember any of it, but my grandfather Roy and his two brothers Herb and Lester all wrestled in the 6-man tag. I was 9 days old first time I went to a wrestling match. And so I grew up watching. And when you grow up watching it night after night, match after match, a star after star, angle after angle, it gets in your blood. And I was third generation, so it's really in my blood. And I never ever considered doing anything else other than being a wrestler.
Me too. Yeah. It's just, it's when you've done it that long and it's that generational like that, it's not even like you give it a second thought of, hey, this is the family business. How can I fit in? How can I contribute? And I had that same attitude. People ask me all the time, are you disappointed about your career that you were never the world champion or never the top guy in a territory or all that stuff? That was never my wish, to be the world champion or, to be the Hulk Hogan of any particular territory. I just had this thing stuck in the back of my head was I just wanted to be one of the guys that when the other lineup, whether it be I was a heel or a babyface or whatever it was, I wanted that other locker room to be talking to the booker or promoter or whatever and saying, hey, I want to work with that guy.
Yeah.
That was my aspiration. And I figured the money and everything, if I could achieve that, would come.
Yes. And it did for you, Arn. And you certainly earned it. And you're exactly right, man. You just want to be a part of it. You don't, I didn't aspire to become a big time promoter. I just wanted to get my tights on. I wanted to get in that ring. I just wanted to do what my dad did and what I saw my granddad do, and then things worked out to where I went the way that my dad and my granddad went, and I ended up running my own companies and my own businesses. And wow, and dealing with young guys like you was such a thrill. It was just it was so pleasing, man, to get the guy that had your attitude involved and in your dressing room. And like you say, and that went on. You were heel. I was a babyface a lot of times when you were heel in that territory, and guys would go, I want to work with Arn, man. Can they figure me an angle with Arn? You know, and I wasn't surprised. You know, I don't blame you, man. We all want to work with Arn. You know, even the top guys wanted to work with Arn. So, you know, I mean, it's a great professional wrestling is it hurts me to see where we are nowadays, you know, as compared to what it was in the 80s. But back in my granddad's day and my dad's day, and wow, in the 70s and the 80s, it was just unbelievable lifestyle. There wasn't any better thing you could have done. I don't know how any other sport could have had more fun or been in a better lifestyle than professional wrestlers.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.